We just started. Hi, everybody. What's up?
Hey, everybody. I'm Tarl Yarber with Fixated Real Estate.
This is my wife, Heather.
Let's say hi to Heather.
You want to say hi? This is my wife, Heather. She is, how pregnant are you? 5 months pregnant with our new little baby boy.
That's awesome. So we're here, once again, we talked about last week. We're doing a live show every Wednesday here on BiggerPockets. You can watch it on Facebook, you watch it on BP, and you can also watch it on YouTube as well. This week, just so happens that I'm actually in Maui with this man right here, Mr. Brandon Turner, that you guys all know and love. And we wanted to be able to answer any questions that you guys have. We're going to be monitoring Facebook, we're going to be monitoring YouTube, but we also want to get to know Brandon a little bit better, and we want to talk about real estate and do what we can. We got 30 minutes to knock this thing out. We're in Maui. One of the best things about this business is meeting cool people and being able to do business with them. So, Brandon and I never talked about how we met each other before, but we met at a meetup, right?
Did we? I don't even know her.
I think we met at a meetup.
I feel like I've always known you.
Nah, I feel like that too. So, in this business, you meet so many cool people, and the fact that you can do business with them, hang out with them, learn from them, grow with them, it's so huge. Your inner surrounding circle of the top 5 people you hang out with is probably one of the most important things and lessons I've ever learned. What about you, Brandon?
I don't really like people, so I prefer to not hang out with people. Mostly,
right.
Yeah. No, there's this joke. I'm actually making a video on this for BiggerPockets, but there's this joke where this guy goes in a waiting room, and he's sitting there, and he's rubbing his arm because it hurts, and then some guy sits next to him in a doctor's office, right? And the guy sits down next to him, rubbing his knee, and then that guy's rubbing his arm, and he's rubbing his knee at the same. He's like, ah, and then the guy who sits down gets up and walks away. He's healed. Another person comes in sneezing and sits down next to him, and all of a sudden the guy with the now arm and knee hurt, and he starts sneezing and arm and leg, and the sneeze guy is healed, gets up. And then another person walks in. He does it 5 times. It's a great little sketch thing. Anyway, finally, a pregnant woman walks in, and the guy just and he runs out. Right? So the idea is you become like those you associate with, like osmosis, right? So by hanging out with smart people like this guy, or these people on both sides of me, you become a little bit smarter. So I'm a huge believer in meetups and connecting with people, and just getting together people, especially in cool locations like this.
Yes.
To have just high-level talks about business. So
I want to actually turn the tables for a second before we really get going. So Brandon Turner runs BiggerPockets podcast, as you guys know. How many episodes have you guys done?
300 and a lot.
300 and a lot, right? I was on 189. It's the #1 episode that they ever had, I think. So at least in my opinion. So that said,
you guys see some stuff right here.
What?
It's ourselves talking to ourselves.
What I wanted to go over though is that Brandon Turner is always interviewing everybody else. So why don't we interview Brandon for a second and get a chance to do that? So
first question. How much caffeine have you had, Brandon?
How much caffeine?
I have not had any caffeine. However, I'm coming off of an hour and a half. I had a 90-minute live webinar with BiggerPockets on multifamily. And if you know me, nothing fires me up like multifamily real estate. That fires me up. So that's why. Well,
that said, we're going to talk about multifamily in a second. We're also going to talk about mobile home parks, and because I'm very curious about what Brandon's got going on with that. But I also wanted to ask Brandon, out of all the episodes that he has actually done in BiggerPockets, so the 300 and something webinars and not webinars, sorry, podcasts, what is the best advice that you've heard from all the different podcast guests? And we're going to let somebody else monitor this so Brandon doesn't keep looking at it.
Probably a good idea. Thanks. Best advice?
Best advice from any podcast guest that you've ever had. And let's talk about specifically, it has to be real estate related.
Okay. Okay, I'm gonna summarize, because I can't tell you one person said this, but it's more of what I've seen the best of the best do. And that is they treat their business like a funnel. I mean, you guys have probably heard me talk about this before. And people say it all the time, but I can't think of the first person told me. Basically, the best investors I know, they treat their business like they have a system for getting leads that come in. Some kind of system, and usually it's an automated process or a person. For example, in your business, you have Nate.
Yes.
Nate brings you leads in your business. Then you analyze those leads. You run the numbers, right? Sometimes it's as quick as, oh yeah, we don't buy in that area, throw it away. And sometimes it's as quick as, it's actually, let's go through a 20-minute long analysis and find out exactly how much we should pay and do a walkthrough, right? But you have to run the numbers. Then you get the number of how much you can pay and you make an offer. And if you make an offer, every property has a number that could make it a good deal. So you find that number, you go after it, and then sometimes you get a deal accepted and sometimes you get rejected. And you get rejected a lot more than you get accepted. But, it's that process.
Just having
everybody
strategy.
does. Yeah, having that strategy. And everybody does it. Now, some people get thousands of leads. Some people get, 2 leads. But no matter how many, every good investor does the same thing. They get leads somehow. They somehow run the numbers. They make offers, and they sometimes get deals. And if you're consistent about that, if you're trying to buy your first deal or you're trying to buy 5,000 properties this year, it doesn't matter. The same process, and that's what I really learned is like to treat it like that. It's a business, just like owning McDonald's.
And I would totally agree with that. Like what I've seen over the years with investors, myself and others, a lot of people treat it like a hobby and not like a real business.
Yeah.
And I've had people ask me, it's like, hey, what do you think about my business? And like, well, you don't really have a business. Like, you're treating it like a hobby. So, and whether it's you're doing thousands of multifamily units or whether you're doing one single family, it's some sort of strategy, some sort of pipeline that brings a deal all the way in to where we go from acquisitions to disposition and having each step of the line done. And I've seen people go like, I don't have, the worst investors that I've seen are they can't explain how they got what they got, right, at all. They're just doing. Right, so if you could take a step back and go, how did I acquire this? How did we actually disposition this? What did we do for rehab? What did we do for exit strategy? And start systemizing each step. Eventually, you have a real business as you start growing and being able to scale. It's one of the only ways to do it. So
that's good.
Now,
good advice.
This guy is getting into mobile home parks right now, and I'm very curious about that. I also think you're hiring people right now too. But so if you want to send your what's your cell phone number? You can send
I have actually a job application on my Instagram. Go check out my Instagram.
Yep. So I'm curious, though, what are you doing as far as your strategy right now to acquire mobile home parks? It's speaking about that we just answered how you have to have some sort of acquisition strategy and go in. What's your guys' acquisition strategy without spilling all the beans too much?
Sure. Yeah, it's really, really complex. We talk to a lot of brokers, and the brokers give us leads, and then we analyze the numbers, and then we make offers, and we get them accepted. It's funny, like, we started this 3 months ago, like, hardcore. Like, it was like, all right, we're in, we're doing it, and we started, like, this business, the funnel, right? And so we started reaching out to brokers, and I'm working with a number of people, actually a bunch of individuals from BiggerPockets. We met through BiggerPockets, and there's a team of, I think, 12 of us right now that I'm working with, and they're basically my acquisition team. They're out there talking to brokers, building network connections, bringing in leads, and then I have a few people that are analyzing those deals, figuring out what we can pay for them, running the numbers, because I'm doing this at scale. I needed to bring in other people. So we're doing that, and we made 8 offers, and we got 2 of them accepted out of that, and we might have a third that we're negotiating on, so we've had really good.
How many units is that?
300 under contract right now.
Wow.
Another 700 that we should have under contract as soon as I sign the piece of paper that's in my email.
So I'm sure some people might have the question, how are you going to fund all that?
I was actually hoping you were.
Yeah. BiggerPockets pays them a lot of money.
Yeah, a lot. I'm going to be, I started a fund, so I have a real estate fund that I'm starting, waiting for the paperwork. It should be here any day. And once that's started, I'm going to raise money, and we're going to buy it that way. What's cool about that is, like, it's the same thing I've been teaching for years on a small level and applies it to a larger level. So, like, I always talk about the idea of using partners and private money. It's exactly what we're doing. I'm just finding partners, but instead of finding one partner, I'm going to bring in 100 partners who are accredited investors who are going to be funding the deal, and they're going to get the bulk majority of it. But you know what? I would rather have 30% of an amazing 1,000-unit portfolio than 100% of a single-family house, right? And I'm okay with that. And so that's why I'm getting larger, and I'm going to use the team effort to be able to do that.
Yeah, and then you just grow and grow and grow. That's great.
Yeah.
So one of the things we can do on this for you guys is we have 2 people monitoring. One person, my lovely and sexy wife, Grace, over here. You can see her.
Sure.
Yeah.
Oh, you were going to say me.
Hi. Yep. And then we have
The other
our lovely and sexy friend, Mr. Steve Rosenberg.
That's right.
He's about to be interviewed on the podcast with Brady Predator,
yeah.
which, who knows, that might be 4 months from now before you hear it, but it's going to be really, really good.
It's not like a month out.
It's about a month out. So in about a month, tune in for Steve Rosenberg because he's up next. So if you guys have questions on YouTube or Facebook, we can answer anything in real estate related at all. We're also going to just talk about Maui because it's kind of cool here.
There's someone asking, do you prefer certain states for the mobile home parks?
Certain states for mobile home parks.
Not necessarily. Ideally, Hawaii. I'm just kidding. Hawaii is the only state with no mobile home parks. Certain states are better for them. Certain states are worse. Most of the ones I'm buying are like Midwest. That we're looking right now is Midwest and the Southeast. Though honestly, if something came up in Nevada, something came up in California, I wouldn't buy in California. I don't like the landlord-tenant laws in California. I don't understand them, and I don't like them, and I don't like the direction that's headed. I love California. I just don't like the landlord-tenant laws there. But I would buy in Washington. I'd buy pretty much wherever. It's the thing about going larger that's cool is that when you go larger, you're not necessarily relying on your local team. Like, you can build a team around a single property. I'm not going to buy like a duplex in the middle of Connecticut, if I don't know anybody in Connecticut, that would be a tremendous amount of work to have to build a team around one property in Connecticut. But if I'm going to buy a 500 pad park or a 300 unit park or a 50 unit park, fine, I can build a team around that in whatever area that I buy in. So that's one of the, buying long distance, you got to have a team. You got to have people on the ground there. What's David Green talked about the famous for the, I don't know, there's like 4 people, the core four. It's like your agent, you have to have a good real estate agent, a lender, a property manager, and a contractor. And then there's other CPAs, lawyers, all that, but like, you can build that with large properties anywhere.
Yeah, and I want to piggyback on that because most of my back in the day, which isn't that long ago, we were flipping houses in 7 different states. And speaking from experience, when you're flipping one house in one state, it's a pain in the ass. When you're flipping 10 in one state or 20 in one state, it's really not that big of a deal because you've built that team. And so, yeah, I've never really thought about so much if you have a 500 unit, then you actually get hired just for that 500 unit and so forth versus that one house, that one rental, that one flip. You have to find the contractor, everything, and you need boots on the ground is way more important than anything else.
Yeah.
Like, and especially when you're not in that ground.
Yeah.
And what I found when we started investing in our backyard and going back into Seattle area, I worked actually harder investing in Seattle and because I lived there than I did because we got started investing out of state. When we invested out of state, I didn't work as hard because I had to set up people and teams and they had to do all the work. I couldn't drive the house all the time. But as soon as I started investing in Seattle all the time, I worked harder because I could go to them all the time. So it's kind of interesting how that works. Did you have a question on?
So there's a question from a wholesaler, Leo, asking Brandon, Tom Kroll, a wholesaler who you interviewed on a podcast, says that you should have at least 150 cash buyers and text or email my deals to my buyers. Do you agree with that strategy?
Can I talk about that one? I want to. So the question is, if you guys didn't hear that, is that as a wholesaler said that on a podcast that you should have at least 150 cash buyers, and that you should email them out to any deal that you get, email it out to that, and whether we agree to that or not. Speaking as a cash buyer, right? I know from my perspective is that I don't want to be one of those 150, right? And also speaking from perspectives of people that I know really, really, really well that are solid, some of the best wholesalers in the United States, they prefer to have a short list most of the time because you might have 150, 200, 300 cash buyers, quote, everybody's a cash buyer, right? Especially right now. And what if they don't close? If you don't have a relationship with that person and you're dealing with somebody that's in a stressful situation when they're selling their house and they got 2 weeks to close because maybe they're getting kicked out or maybe they're having some sort of domestic issue or something's happening to them financially and they have to close in 2 weeks, and then you go send it out to your 300-person mailing list and some random person says, I'll buy it, because they're going to pay a higher assignment fee, and they go to close and they don't close because you have no idea what their track record is and the relationship with is it. So you should always you can have that bigger list when you have like plenty of time to kill and you know that you can make a deal happen, but you should also have that short list of 3 to 5 investors that you know will close every time, all the time, no matter what, in my opinion.
So
put me on that
That's
list.
exactly what I'd say.
I got one guy and his wife, Salvador Ramirez. They want to start with rentals. So much information. Where do they start? Where's the first step?
What's the first step to getting invested into rentals?
Yeah, I like to say like the world of rental property investing is super like big, right? Like when you say I want to do rentals, it's kind of like saying like I don't know, I want to buy a car. Like there's a lot of different types out there. There's a million types. Or I want to have a vehicle. Okay, well, what kind of vehicle, right? So I guess I would tell people to get a broad view. Like my favorite thing is listen to a bunch of podcasts. Find out something that's just like, oh, that feels good to me. That like I get that. I like it. I understand it. For example, I want to buy cheap, lower end, C-class, cheap properties in Tacoma, Washington. Right? If you live near there, great. That's an avenue.
Leave those alone. I buy those.
Yeah, you could do that.
Tacoma sucks. Don't go.
You could do that, right? That's an avenue. Or you could be like, I'm going to buy A-class properties in Seattle. I'm going to rent those out. Or I'm going to buy vacation rental properties on the coast of Florida. That's fine. I own a triplex here in Maui that like rent is like $2,000 to $3,000 a month for a single like apartment. It's crazy here, right? But I also own properties that rent for $400 a month for the same size properties over another area. So it's really wide the number of stuff you can do. So start wide and then as quickly as possible narrow down to what feels good and what works with your personality, with your location, the area you want to invest in, with the amount of money you have.
Want to put in.
Yeah, how much money you have. Yeah, if you're going to go buy triplexes in Maui, you're going to need some money more than buying a C-class in Tacoma. So,
what's your down payment? What's your financeability? All that. You might need to partner with somebody. If you have zero money, and you have no credit and you have no job, it's going to be a little hard. Not to say that you can't do it, but you're going to have to partner with somebody. And if you are somebody that, hey, you in our area in Seattle, you got plenty of people that work at Microsoft, Boeing, they got great jobs, great income, but they want to invest in real estate, so that they're very bankable, but they don't have the time to go find and finance. So maybe they'll partner with somebody that has the time. You need 3 things in real estate, in my opinion. You need time, experience, and money, right? And if you don't have to have all 3, you can be the person with the money, and somebody else can have the time and experience, or vice versa, in any combination that you need. And so discover that for yourself. Next question.
Yeah, so when flipping long distance, how do you decide on the interior of the home? Is it your own set, or do you outsource it to local experts and let them tell you?
So the question is, when flipping out of state, how do you decide on the interior? I'm assuming the finishes is probably the question there, like how far do you take the remodel? That's a great question. The answer doesn't matter what state it is or where it's at ever. The answer is, what are the comparables in that market? Look at your comps, your comparables. It could be, you could be in downtown Manhattan, you can be in Podunk, wherever. It's what's the comparables in that market. That's the most important thing. If your house, if that entire neighborhood, the houses that you're comping to have for market countertops, sheet vinyl, carpet and everything, and like just crappy whatever, then that's fine. Do that. Don't go put granite, tile, and all that kind of stuff into it, because that's a waste of money. Just because the market, just because you can make the house nicer doesn't mean it's going to get more money. You can throw away money at that point. So what we do is we try to keep things systemized as much as possible. Our good buddy Jay Scott does that stuff all the time. We were doing that for a long time too. We just didn't write a book about it. So, but and we love Jay.
You missed out.
Yeah, I missed out. But but that said, like, it's just pick what's right for your market, right? And look at the comps, and don't go farther than you need, and don't go below. That happens a lot in the BRRRR strategy, a ton that we've seen. A lot of people sit there and they comp their houses against flips for BRRRRs, and then they do rent-ready finishes. And because, like, oh, it's a rental, so we'll do rent-ready. It appraises then for like $50,000 less than what they thought or whatever, because they did lower grade finishes because they were comping to a higher grade house. So always remember, like, what's your comps? That's it. That's the only thing you got to know.
Great answer.
There's a question from Carson Abney. He has discovered BiggerPockets 2 days ago, and he's learning so much about it. He's so stoked about it. And he's like, I realize my age and maybe limitations I have. What do you suggest for me, to do despite my age? What do you go? You were 16.
Is he 6? Oh, he's 16.
16
Not
years
60.
old.
Yeah.
So we got a listener that discovered us 2 days ago. 16 years old. What do you do despite
Say hi
that
to
age?
Carson.
Yeah.
This guy can actually answer that question for you, and why he can is because his son, who is how old?
14.
14, just bought his first house. Steve Rosenberg.
I wasn't ready for
So
that
that's a good question.
So,
His
I
name
think
is Carson.
Carson, my son learned through a lot of education and a lot of things that he was learning through podcasts and shows, and really just listening to what I was listening to. He started learning, and I don't know if you call it through osmosis or what, but one day he actually approached me and said, I want to buy a rental property. And then we actually went through the mental gymnastics as to what are you looking for in the rental property. What are you looking for? Cash flow? Are you looking for equity? What is it that you want, and what is it you want as a result? And more importantly, the question I had for him was, what's the exit strategy on this property? So a lot of people, when they get into real estate, they never think of how they're going to exit the deal, which no one ever does, because they think they're going to keep it forever, and that is an exit strategy. And I would say, just like everyone else on here says, you just got to educate yourself. You got to continually go above and beyond to get with people that are doing it, that have done it, and see what they're doing. Because it's not magic. Yep. It's just consistency of learning and putting yourself in an uncomfortable position.
So I'm actually a question on that. Did your son go to the bank of dad to get to buy it, or did he?
So it's a funny question. So he came to me and said, I'd like to buy a rental property. And I said, well, how much money you got? And he said, I've got $10,000. And my first question was, how'd you get $10,000 without me knowing? Yeah, how did that happen? But he did. He said, I've been saving my money. And I said, okay, cool. I said, well, that's not enough.
Yeah.
And he said, well, how much do I need? I said, well, if you're going to do standard, 20% down, blah, blah, blah. I said, you're probably looking at $30,000. He says, well, I don't have that. I said, yeah, you got a problem. He goes, well, how do I get that? I said, well, you got 2 options. You can save the money, or you can try to be creative. And he says, well, if I save it, I'll be 28. I said, yeah. He goes, what's the other option? I said, well, you could partner with someone. And he said, what do you mean? I said, well, you can go with someone else. They can split it 50-50, and then they can do the deal with you. And so then he comes and he thinks about it and comes back a couple days later and he says, well, would you be willing to partner with me? And I said, well, what are the terms?
Yeah.
And he said, what do you mean? I said, well, you got to learn. Go find out what terms are on a deal and come back and we'll talk. So then we did it. We went through the gymnastics of it, and then we ended up, then when he had to, before he found the deal, tell me what a good deal looks like to you. So run it through your head first, so that when we see the deal, you already know what's going on. So it's like you're not looking at it for the first time. So we were running scenarios of, is this a good deal? Is this a bad deal? And then he would have to explain to me, why is this a bad deal? Tell me why this doesn't make sense. Is it the bad area? Is it appreciation? So it was really more of a learning process. And so the deal we found, we did not get a lot of equity in the deal, but it was rent ready. We leased it 4 days after we bought it. And I have not heard from that property since, and it's been about a year and a half.
Wow.
And he gets his cash flow every month, and he reinvests some of it, and I let him keep some so that he can do what he wants to do, so he sees the cash flow coming from it. And
Dude, that's
great
awesome.
lessons.
That's awesome. Cool. And that doesn't matter if you're 16, 14, or 48 or 60. That was actually great advice for all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Any other questions? No good ones.
While you're looking at them, I'll add one more thing to that. If you want a real tangible thing to do, get really good at analyzing deals and get really good at helping investors. If you're 16,
yes.
Learn how to install carpet, or learn how to run to Home Depot for investors, or learn how to, do something, to paint a house, or I don't know, if it's physical, if you like that, if it's more of a admin task, being the right-hand man or right-hand woman, assuming Carson, you're a dude, being the right-hand man of a investor would be an awesome way to learn. Basically an internship, so to speak, for the next 3, 4, 5 years, maybe through college, and then you're going to be well on your way, far above everybody your age.
We had an intern last summer, a 17-year-old kid who was a buddy of ours' son, who's just I want my son to, he really loves real estate, wants to learn it. And I'm like, what the hell am I going to do with this kid? And so, he sat on every meeting, right? He would drive our properties when we didn't want to. I even gave him a weed whacker sometimes to say, hey, go cut the grass or whatever. Yeah. So, and he just helped out as wherever he could, but he was just there, and he was just a sponge. It didn't hurt us to have him around. It was actually kind of when he went back to school, we're like, shit, who's going to go drive the properties we don't want to drive now? So, but it's a big deal. So, Grace.
Yeah.
Do you have any suggestions how to get into rental markets that are becoming very expensive, like Dallas, Texas, San Diego?
Suggestions getting into expensive rental
Don't do it. Just sit on your butt, watch TV. There's some really good TV shows on right now. Netflix has a lot. Do that and let everyone, let me and Tarl go after those markets. No. You want to go first?
I would. So, I would ask, why do you even want to go into those markets, for one, right? Because there's a big thing called the United States. But also, and I'm not trying to just joke around about it, but I am serious. There's some markets that maybe you shouldn't be in, to begin with, just because maybe they're local or so forth. That's a good spot. Everything's math, no matter what. At the end of the day, it's math. How can you acquire the deal? Where's the peak of the market at in that market? I know in my neighborhood, Seattle, and I love San Diego. We've been, trying to get in there for a while. So in Seattle and stuff, right now, I'm not going to buy a $700,000 single-family home that after I put $300,000 into it's going to be worth $1.3 million, which would be a great flip, and then rent it out for $8,000 a month. It's not going to work out that way. It's going to end up being that I'm renting it out for $3,000 to $4,000 a month, and it's not going to cash flow. Even if I leave a couple $100,000 into it, it's not going to cash flow. Multifamily, same thing. Why do I want to buy something at a 4.5 cap right now in my neighborhood, or 5 cap and stuff like that in our neck of the woods, when we can go to other areas that's going to be a better cap, because cap rate compression and stuff is just killing us. So, right. So that's my opinion on it. So ask yourself why you want to be in those markets. But guess what? There's other people that are actually still winning in those markets. So find out what they're doing and what they're doing right and wrong. It might have to be that you have to go to a tertiary market first, which is just outside that area. That's why I don't like saying it on live, but I like Tacoma and Washington, in Seattle, because it's just south. But we also look at Eastern Washington, and we've done other states and stuff. So, but that's why. Why do you want to be there? And then figure out what the others are doing. And it might have to be that you have to buy A-grade paper stuff. Maybe you have the 1031 into it. Maybe there's all sorts of stuff that you might have to do to get those higher end areas. But why do you want to be there? I
would say you have 3 options if you're trying to buy. It's exactly what you just said. You have 3 options if you want to buy in an expensive area. It's a competitive market, any of those markets, right? A, you can do nothing. You can sit around and just wait for the market to crash and miss out on years of real estate education and experience. I don't recommend that. 2, you can find what works in that market. Because I can guarantee you, every single market in the country, something is working right now in that market. Right? Maybe it's vacation rentals, maybe it's flipping, maybe it's high-end, maybe it's building, new construction. Something works there, and somebody's making a lot of money in real estate in that market. You can find what they're doing. Now, if you're in downtown Seattle, I don't want to do what's working in Seattle right now, because that's not for me.
Yeah.
And so then the third option is you can go elsewhere. And that means that either a tertiary market, go around your area, drive 2 hours away, or it means going across the country and learning how to do it somewhere else. So,
and it's easier than you think. It's just learning the new steps, and it's just putting the effort into it.
The fourth option, you could always invest in somebody's real estate fund if you're an accredited investor. happen to know people that have a fund.
Mobile
Next.
home parks.
Yeah, like a mobile home park fund.
Go ahead.
Grace.
How do you come up with the cash-on-cash ROI number that you are happy with? What's the difference between 8 and 12%?
Oh,
That's a really good question.
So, no, but that's a really good question.
I choose 12% as what I always say because it was about double what the stock market produces, which is between 6 and 7. I said 12 sounds good, and it's proven to be all right for me, but everyone has their own number. I don't know.
And it's like, how do you come up with the cash-on-cash ROI that you like?
So it's everything, and also you can come up with cash on cash in so many different ways. Like you can say on the entire project, you can say like that is it based on the actual cash that you put into the deal. Like there's so many different ways to slice it up. On a fix and flip specifically, the best way that I think to slice up a cash on cash is not how much money you actually put into the deal, but actually like what the entire project return is if you bought it cash. So that's how we always analyze every single deal we do on a flip as well as a BRRRR or anything like that is if we bought it cash and we rehabbed it cash, because that's the real out-of-pocket between the two. You could finance all that stuff all you want, but then after you go to resell it, after paying closing costs, commissions, all that kind of stuff, whatever profits left over, your net, what's that go into the actual money you invested? So if you take $100,000 purchase, $50,000 rehab, so that's $150,000 out, and your net, and you sell it for $200,000 or something like that, and after expenses, your net's $30,000. In that example, maybe I picked bad math because I have to do this on the spot right now. So what's 30? How many turns 30 go into 150?
5?
20?
Wait,
5?
30 going to 150?
5? So what's that? How many percent is that? 20%. 20%.
Right.
So there you go. That's a 20% cash on cash return because $30,000 net profit after all expenses into $150,000 cash outlay is a 20% cash on cash return on that flip. That said, that's my number. I want 20% cash on cash on my flips or higher based on the project.
Yeah, on a flip, I'd want more than 12% too.
On a project, right? On the project itself. I used to buy 15% plus and plus cash on cash all the time, but then I wanted to change my lifestyle. I didn't want as many projects, and the way the market is right now, I'd rather be picky. But that's how we always determine that on our end. And I also knew if it was 20% cash on cash, that I could add my financing costs in there. I can add like leeway. I can add buffer zones, and it's going to take a long time before we got into the negative and lost money on that project. On rentals, it'd be totally different, right? And that has to do more with your actual like capex and stuff. And that's what you're talking about. Like you leave $10,000 into a rental and you get $3,000 a year in it. That's a 30% cash on cash return for a rental. When a lot of investors might be okay with getting $1,000, net NOI at the end of the year, leaving.
And that's why it gets so hard too. With when you're talking about cash on cash return, I mean, what if I told you, you know what, I'm getting a 10,000% cash on cash return, 10,000%, because I have a penny invested and I'm making $10 a year.
Yeah.
Like that's a crap. And like, who wants to make $10 a year on, or is that 10,000%? Probably somewhere around there, right? You get the idea,
Don't
right?
Judge us.
Like, yeah, we're not math people.
We are.
Yes, yeah. So, the idea of like cash on cash return is super important. I have 12% for rental properties. I don't want to get less than 12. So if I have $1,000 invested, I want to get at least $120 a year in cash flow on that $1,000. For every $1,000 put in, I want $120 in cash flow. And I'm talking real cash flow, not like mortgage, not rent minus mortgage.
Yeah.
I'm talking about actual after all the expenses have been paid out. I want 12%. I chose that number, but yeah, like that also means I have to get at least $100 per month per unit minimum for me to buy a C-class property. So I have both those numbers. And that we can go real deep on that. We don't have time for it because we got to leave here in a couple minutes.
It's all you. Like, there's people I know that, like, they're, for whatever reason, they're happy with you in 1% because, like, I'm getting $300 a month cash flow. I'm like, cool. Like, how much did you leave into the deal? $150,000 or something. You're like, that's not a very good deal.
Yeah, like, I have $1 million invested in it. I'm making $12 a month. Oh, great. Good for you. Like,
and on the flip side, quote, quote, flip side on flips, even though my threshold is 20%, I'll still buy at 15 if the construction's, like, easy and there's some other stuff. But then at the end of the day, I also look at what the actual cash net return is after putting my finance cost in, because what's my time worth, right? Just because it might be at 20%, if it's a $100,000 deal, right, and all this stuff and all the financing, maybe I'm only netting $20,000 on the deal. For me right now, I don't want anything less than $30,000 net after all expenses. But there also could be that you could look at $1 million plus acquisition here, where you're putting $1 million into it in a San Diego, Seattle market, right, and you might be netting $100,000 net. You're going like, I'm making $100,000 on this deal. I was like, yeah, but that's only a 10% cash on cash, right? That's a really risky deal because it's very easy for $1 million to go to $950 like that, right? And it's very easy for a $200,000 rehab to go to $250 like that if you don't know what you're doing. So there you got nothing. So keep that in mind too with those numbers. Question?
How would you offer a mentor value?
how would you offer a mentor value? So, one, there's mentors out there that you can pay, but that's up to you. So there's one way to do it. But I would say for value-wise, it's like find out what they want and what they need in some capacity and stuff like that. I know for us, we get hit up all the time for people wanting us to mentor them, and I can tell you what not to do, right? That's probably the best way, and so can you. It's like, hey, can I take you at the coffee so that you can tell me everything you ever knew about business whatsoever and teach me how to do everything that you do, and then I promise you the first deal I get, that'll split it with you 80-20. Right? You're like, what? So that's a lot of work. But don't do that, right? And I'd say become friends. That's one for sure.
Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah.
So huge. Yeah.
Huge.
Become friends. Like, don't overthink it. Become friends.
Yeah. Become friends.
And bring them a deal. That also would do well.
Absolutely. Show that you go to work. Like, I can tell you also the other thing too. Like, there's a guy that was on the podcast 220, 250. I can't remember. Elliot Smith. Look him up. Great guy. He came to me when he was starting out in Portland, and he was one of those first people that, like, I would say, okay, cool. Here, and I met him on BiggerPockets. Here's what I would do if I was in your position. ABC. He's like, cool. Week later, calls me up. I did ABC.
I didn't know that.
Right?
Yeah. He was.
And I'm like,
that's cool.
That's a breath of fresh air. Because here's the thing: a mentor tells you to do something, and then you go do it, and you come back and you say, here's what I did, and here's what I learned, and here's where I thought it sucked, and here's this. From my perspective, I know other mentors too that have done that. We love that. We're like, oh my god! Like, you're not gonna just go meet me again and be like, oh yeah, I haven't done that yet, right? Or I didn't really like it, or because then you're not taking the advice and stuff in the first place, and maybe it's not for you to begin with. But don't do that. There you go.
Yeah.
Next question.
Brandon, talk about your experience stacking from single family to multi.
Sure. That phrase, the stack. So, like, what is it? Like, how have I stacked? The stack is basically a way of exponentially growing. To explain what that means, essentially, some people grow linearly, which means they buy a house, then another house, then another house, then another house, then another house, and they just go in a straight line. And that's nothing wrong with that. You can buy one house per year for 10 years, and you have 10 houses. That's linear growth. The stack is more like where you grow exponentially, which is I bought a house, and I kind of did that. I bought a house, then I bought a duplex, and then later I bought a fourplex. And I bought some other singles in there. And then I bought a 24 unit. And then I bought some smaller stuff. And then I bought a 50 unit mobile home park. And then now I've got 300 units. And then another 700 units that I'm trying to get now. That I should have. Do we have that yet? I need to sign some papers, right?
Yes.
All right, I got to sign some papers.
A couple autographs away.
Yeah, a couple autographs away from a 700. So, like, that's, like, what that means is you're consistently outside your comfort zone. I just taught this on the webinar earlier. Like, the reason people tend to grow linearly is because they like being in their comfort zone. Right? They like, I feel good buying a single family house. I feel good in the duplex level. And that's easy for me, so I'm going to do that. I said this earlier. If you're not a little bit scared of every deal you're doing, you're not investing outside your comfort zone. And so, like...
Oh, shit.
Yeah, right? Like, it's convicting, right? Like, we oftentimes, like, because for years, and maybe that's fine. Maybe your goal is not to scale up to a massive portfolio, in which case, invest in your comfort zone all day long. But if you want to scale quickly and large, you've got to start asking yourself, am I investing outside my comfort? And not like crazy. I'm not saying go from 1 unit to 500 units, but going from a single to a duplex, not that bad. It's just a little outside.
I do want to challenge one thing on that, like, because there's another number of people that, like, the reason why they lose everything though is because they keep going to the next level. Okay. Right? Yeah. Like, where they might all of a sudden, like, go from bite off more than they could chew. So there is a limit to
you gotta get good at that level before you go to the next level. Like, take the stuff once you, like, if you're solid on single family houses and you feel like you could just buy a single family rental all day long, that's probably go to the next level. But if you're like, I have no idea, I did so many mistakes, a 40 unit, yes.
Yeah, to go from there's a lot of people right now in my market that are going from flips to new builds right now, and that could be a very easy transition and so forth. But, like, from going from you did one flip to I'm going to go do a 30-lot subdivision on raw land, right?
That's
it's going to take
huge
you 3.5, 4 years, right, to go through it. That might be a problem.
Yeah.
Or I've seen people where they go from, like, they did a bunch of low-end fix and flips, and then all of a sudden they go straight to the luxury spec building or luxury spec flips, and they lose their ass on them. Like, and then you made all this money, and then you lost it all on one deal, right? So, and that happens to people. So, I'm a proponent of becoming an expert at whatever your niche is, and as that plate's spinning, you can add another plate, and then you'd start spinning that one and get really good at that one, then you can add another one. Too many people try to do too many things at once, in my opinion, too. They flip, they buy here, they do this, they do that, then they go do that, and they don't pick one niche. So just know where you're going to go to that next level, and if you jump too far and bite off too much more than you can chew can bite you in the ass. Basically.
Yeah, and I didn't jump to that next level of buying like huge 100-unit properties until my years to do it. And now like my rental portfolio, like I have 100 units roughly, 90, 96, 97. Like I maybe spend a couple hours a month like dealing with that. Like really, like it's so automated and systematized and like just solid that like I have time and to expand other things, and that's why. Like I wouldn't have jumped to that if I wasn't ready yet.
Yeah, we all want to be a billionaire tomorrow, right? So and there's a couple steps to it. Grace, did you have?
Let's do one more. We got to go.
Nope.
We got to go.
Was Brandon's beard ever in danger during the fire?
That's an excellent question.
I did.
That's where it started.
Yeah, that's where it started.
Running. A piece of it fell off.
Yeah, I did have to literally like I had. You guys may have seen this on my Instagram at BRRRR, but I literally had to get to the bank that day to do a wire transfer because like, it had to be in the next day, and like I'm in Hawaii, so you have to do it like today to go out tomorrow. And like I had to get to the bank before closing time, and there's a raging fire, and so like traffic was backed up miles because of the fire, and so I literally got out of the car and I ran 2 miles into the fire area, like into like the sketchy, like smoky, hazy, yeah, crazy. And I got to the bank right before they closed, and like I mean like. It was not some nice guy gave me a big mask to wear. Like driving by, it was like idiot. Why is he running in this? And I was like, I gotta get earnest money in. So like anyway, I went and got to the.
You
bank.
don't understand.
No, you don't understand. This is real estate.
Yeah, there's a fire.
I'll risk my life. Anyway.
So awesome. Like Brandon, thanks for doing this.
Thank you.
You know, if you follow Brandon at Beardy Brandon, make sure you like, subscribe, everything on BiggerPockets. Like they're always awesome. I'm on Instagram at Tarl Yarber. I'm new to Instagram, so don't judge me. My company's Fixated Real Estate. You can check us out on Facebook. We do a lot of videos and a lot of stuff there too. We do this every Wednesday now. It's typically going to be 12 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. It's just because we're in Hawaii, we didn't want to wake up so early. And we hope that you guys have an awesome time. Brandon's got to jump on a podcast now. This guy's a content machine. This guy right here.
Steve.
So look out for Steve Rosenberg's podcast coming out a little bit. Check out my sexy wife one more time. Hi, Grace. She's also a great property manager in our area, but she's not going to use yours. She only does ours. So.
And the reason for all of this right here, I got to do one more shout out. Ryan Murdoch over there.
Oh yeah, Ryan's good too.
Ryan's pretty much the one that makes all of this happen. How I jumped from a webinar to a live to a podcast all in one day. He's over there like time like
gotta go. Right.
All right.
So David Green's waiting.
Yes.
But we'll check you guys out next week. We're gonna probably do a property walk with one of another investors out in Seattle area. We're gonna do property walks a lot, break down deals every single week with as much as we got. But we'll see you guys there. Follow BiggerPockets and see you next time.